Now, after a while, we moved from Brackley to Great Linford. Now, at that time, they were advertising for harness makers and saddlers in the railway works in Wolverton. Well, that was my dad's trade, you see, harness making. So we moved to Great Linford and we lived in a row of cottages in between the canal and Great Linford railway station. Now, alongside the canal there was a pub, and that was called the Wharf. And next door to that there was an old building that my dad used to use for all his harness work, for the boaties that used to come up along the canal. You see, all the boats then were pulled by horse. Oh, blimey, you'd sometimes get maybe 15 or 20 boats parked up along the canal there. And as a lad they used to invite me on board to have a look round. And oh, how wasn't it decked out beautiful? All polished brassware. Lovely. Well, one day I was gawping in the canal. I must have been about 5 then. I was having a look round to see if I could see any dead fish. And my brother George, he would have been about 2 then, he came up behind me and pushed me in. Oh, hell, there was an hell of a fuss. All the women came running out of their gardens with their line props, trying to fish me out, but no, they couldn't get hold of me. Well, my dad heard all the noise, come running out of his workshop, seen what had happened, jumped straight in the canal and fetched me out. Now, the strange thing is, my old dad could never swim. But he didn't give it a second thought, Oh, no, he just jumped straight in. Well, I thanked our George a lot for that later, let me tell you. Now, after a while, we moved from Great Linford because we started to get up in the world a bit. Oh, yeah, and we moved from Linford to New Bradwell, or Bradwell as it's known locally. Now, if you lived in Bradwell in those days, you were considered to be doing rather well. And if you lived in Wolverton, oh, blimey, you were among the royal family. Well, of course, with me moving house and everything, I also had to change school. Well, you would have thought I'd come from Australia. I was treated like a blooming foreigner. I'd only moved a couple of miles down the road. Well, you see, all the kids in Bradwell that lived in Bradwell went to Bradwell School, nobody from outside, so I was a blooming foreigner. And it weren't long before I had to prove myself. Because as you know, in every school, there's always the bigwig, king of the kids. And this boy's name was Bill Forrester. Well, I had to shape up, prove myself, and me and Bill, we had a do. Unfortunately, I met my Waterloo. But years later I returned the compliment, and me and Bill became pals, and he went off to become a professional boxer in the finish. Now, at weekends, us kids used to have our own papers, or magazines. You get your normal papers during the week for the grown-ups. There was only 2 papers then that I remember. There was the Leader, and that was for the Liberals. And then there was the Daily Mail, and that was for the Tories. Well, there was only 2 political parties then as well, you see. But at weekends us kids had our own magazines. There was one for the girls called The Girl's Friend, and there was one for the boys called The Boy's Friend. Now, let me tell you straight away, there was nothing to do with sex in any of them. Oh, no. All the stories that you read were about school days, schoolboy heroes, the one who'd run the fastest race, or the one that was always out catching burglars. You lapped it up like new milk, and it influenced you. Well, I reckon it influenced me all throughout my life,